For more, let's bring in our panel. Elizabeth Pipko, Republican strategist and former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, and A. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Welcome both. Scott, I want to start with you tonight. You were just hearing from Libby Dean, a U.S.-brokered peace deal between Israel and Hamas showing some promise. Hamas currently only accepting parts of the plan tonight. Is there anything that you see as the potential sticking point that really could hold up this deal on either side?
Well, it certainly sounds promising. That's the first thing. Second of all, trust is going to be really important. And right now, there's a low level of trust between Israel and Hamas. I mean, remember, Israel bombed Hamas leaders in Qatar when they were there to negotiate a settlement last month and was promised that they would not be harmed. And then the bombing took place. I think the real sticking point for both sides will be, when does Hamas turn the hostages over, and when does Hamas have to give up their arms, if you will? Because once Hamas gives up the hostages, then, Israel and the U.S. or whomever could say, thanks for the hostages, you've lost your leverage, and therefore now the bombing will continue because we're going to wipe out Hamas. That would be detrimental to the peace process. Now, if Israel's forces pull back and they do it simultaneously somehow, or they do it with international arbitrators, or they do it with the international peacekeeping force. Those are the type of details that need to be worked out because there's still a lack of trust. But getting the hostages home is really, really important. And I really think to some level, both sides are battle-worn and war-weary.
Yeah, certainly. Elizabeth, over to you. Netanyahu saying that he hopes to see the remaining hostages released in the coming days. In your mind, would that signal the unofficial end to this war in Gaza?
Well, look, I would certainly hope so, right? There's many of us that have been sitting around for nearly 2 years now, waiting solely for the release of those hostages that obviously never should have been taken in the first place. Unfortunately, this is not a normal situation, right? You just asked Scott what could be a sticking point here, what might actually tense up the situation. The only thing that could tense up the situation is the fact that we are trying to make a deal with monsters. Hamas are not folks that we can actually trust to make any kind of a deal. We have seen that happen time and time again over the last 2 years. I want to remind people it's not the first time Hamas has signaled that they are willing to make a deal and then actually change their mind. Of course, tricking the entire international media at the exact same time. These are people who do not value their lives. These are people who committed atrocities on October 7th, the likes of which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And these are folks that we cannot actually be confident in making a deal with. So I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful for more than anything the release of those hostages who should never have been taken in the first place, that have been held for 2 years now in unspeakable conditions. And like you said, I can only hope that would signal the end to this war.
All right, Scott, let's go back to you and let's go back to the U.S. The White House tonight confirming President Trump is federalizing 300 Illinois National Guard troops following weeks of threats to send the Guard to Chicago as part of the crime crackdown. We see Governor J.B. Pritzker saying that the order came after an ultimatum from the Department of War. What do you see as the next steps in this latest call for troops in a major city?
Well, the next step is for the Attorney General for Illinois to go to court to block those troops as being unnecessary. And the fundamental sticking point and why they're going to win, like California won, like Portland has won, is that the law requires the governor of Illinois to invite those troops in cooperation with the feds. That's not the case. And so Pritzker, and one thing they've done, like Maryland has done and California has done, they've done their own law enforcement surge, which will be a really important fact in their case against bringing in troops. Now, what the government, the White House is going to say is that we're bringing in troops to protect ICE. ICE has every right to be there. But you see, the problem with the protesters and ICE and what the White House messaging is that they've lied to the American people. They said that these people were going to get rid of the murderers and the rapists and the monsters and the gang members. And quite frankly, this administration really does believe that if you're here illegally, then they have every right to deport you or expedite your deportation. Most Americans agree that we don't want killers and rapists and monsters in our country and do what's necessary to get them out. But the hardworking individuals who are waiting for a hearing, who are here, whether they've got a green card or waiting for a hearing and working and paying taxes, Those people are being violently removed at times, violently removed, and that's why these protesters are out there. And so there's got to be a better way. I'll leave you with one note. Barack Obama deported more illegal immigrants than any other president, including Donald Trump, right? And you didn't have this massive show of force, right? It was done surgically, it was done legally, appropriately, and the numbers bear them out. This political show that comes along with ICE and showing force and National Guard is repugnant to being effective, if you will. As a former prosecutor, I can tell you a much different negotiated approach works much better than the show of force here, political force and political showmanship that the White House is bringing
All
to
right,
this
Elizabeth,
issue.
I want to get you back in here. I mean, what is your response to that?
Couple of things. I don't know how much we have time for, but look, the fact is, if you're here illegally, we actually do have the right to deport you, right? That's kind of how our country works. At the same time, I think the reason that you didn't see this response when Barack Obama was in office is because the media did not decide that Barack Obama was our enemy and tried to lie to the American people for nearly 10 years about how they should oppose him. That is the sole reason. That's why when you ask most of these protesters, they actually don't even know that Barack Obama deported more people than Donald Trump or anybody else. That's what's going on here. It's a fight against Donald Trump and a fight against Republicans, and it should be a fight with the Democrats and Republicans working together to save our country. What happened under the Biden administration is shameful, and shameful not just to Americans, but including to those who were lied to, came to our country under false pretenses, and now are dealing with this mess. Unfortunately, Donald Trump was brought in because the American people see that. They are upset about that. They're upset about the amount of people that have come here illegally, that have taken health care away from them. That's why the government is shut down right now, because of the funding that Joe Biden allowed so many illegal immigrants who take from hardworking American taxpayers. They're upset about the criminals that were allowed in, and they're upset that they have been lied to for this many years. That's why they voted Donald Trump in. That's why the majority of people support what's going on, apart from those that are jobless and fighting and screaming at law enforcement officers in the street instead.
Yep.
Elizabeth
But if you
Pipko.
look at the polling, what they're really mad about, if I may, if you look at the polling, they're really mad about how the White House is implementing the deportation of illegal immigrants. That's what they're really mad about. They may be mad about other things, but the polling shows that clearly.
Based on how they voted in the last election, I think they're mad about one thing.
All right, I think we're out of time,
Oh,
but
touche
panel A.
there.
Scott Bolden, Elizabeth Pipko, thank you both.